Again, welcome to Faith Chapel. I'm happy that you found yourself here this morning. What we're going to do is we are going to begin our new series entitled Under Construction, and here is why. We believe, I don't just believe, I've seen it, I've been a part of it, I felt it, I know it. Faith can be difficult. And sometimes it seems like when we're actually trying to move forward with Jesus, something happens and it just kind of wipes everything out. And it could be sometimes our own sin, but that's not what we're going to be talking about in this series. What we're going to talk about is all those outside influences that come into our life and change the way we see Jesus, or change the way we see the church, change the way we view our pastors, change the way we view each other as a congregation. It's just the mess that happens. And so something happens, and it's happened to a lot of us. If it hasn't happened to you, count yourself blessed, but it can wipe out your faith. And so as we do this, as we talk about all the different ways that the enemy might come in, or someone might do something that pulls the rug out from under you, in this fallen world full of fallen people, there is no limit to the damage that can be done to our faith. So in this series, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some of the lesser talked about things that can cause havoc to our faith. So what we know is that our own sin and our own apathy, they can harm our faith, right? We know that. We talk about that a lot. I think the Bible talks about that a lot. But what about those outside influences? What about the things that happen in the church that cause pain? What about the things that happen that cause doubt? What about the outside influences, the things you see on social media, all those kinds of things? What about those things? How does the Bible address them? How does the church address them? That's what we're going to look at in this series. And so whether you feel strong today and you're like, man, my faith is strong, I feel good about where I'm at, or whether you feel like you're just kind of hanging on by a thread, you are still under construction. And so that construction process of your faith is actually not going to be complete until King Jesus returns and completes our faith project. And so I want you to just kind of take a moment and think about, like, you're walking past a new big construction project. And you're walking past it and you're looking at it and you don't really know what it's going to be yet. In fact, I'm remembered, anybody seen driven by one of those iFly places, like indoor skydiving? Have you ever driven by one of those when it's being built? As it's being built, they'll have it's this weird structure, if you've ever seen it. It's not a normal looking building. And as it's being built, what they did was they put out billboards that said, guess what's coming here, right? Because they're trying to get people thinking about it, talking about it, all that kind of stuff. But the building is so weird looking, they're like, hey, see if you can guess it, right? And so you're walking by a construction site and you see the scaffolding, you see exposed wires, you see dust everywhere. It's noisy. It's messy. It looks like chaos. Construction workers are talking like construction workers, right? It's crazy. But someone has the blueprints. Somebody knows what that building is going to be. Someone sees the potential. Someone sees what that building could become. Now, I want you to imagine now that that's your faith. Some of us are in the middle of a faith journey that feels like a construction zone. It's not pretty. It's not polished. You've got questions. Maybe you've got wounds. Maybe you've got doubts. But God is not done with your project yet. And maybe you're in the middle of a remodel, okay? Now remodels can be very fun, right? Because you're going and you're doing something you've always wanted to do. But sometimes remodels are not so fun. Maybe it's a metaphorical leak in your water heater that causes all kinds of damage and flood damage to your home, or metaphorically speaking, to your faith, right? How do you come back from that? Well, that's what this series is going to be about. It's going to be about faith that's under construction. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about that hard stuff, doubt and suffering and disappointment, and how we rebuild when it feels like everything is falling apart. And so as I set this up today, we're going to paint some broad strokes. This is going to be an intro to where we're going. And so we're not going to really get into the nitty-gritty or the details today, but as we move on into this series, we will get more specific as we talk about some of the issues that may have caused your remodel. So here's the first thing I want us to look at, and it's very important that we grasp this, especially if you find yourself today in a place of doubt or a place of rebuilding your faith, and it is this: doubt is not the opposite of faith. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about doubt. Some of us were told growing up, or maybe in a church environment or somewhere, that doubt is dangerous. That if you question, then you're just weak in your faith. But the Bible, as we look at the Bible, it showcases doubt, right? It showcases doubt, and doubt shows up in real people with real stories. And so we're going to be in Mark chapter 9, verse 14. And so as you turn there, I'll tell you about a different story of doubt that we won't be looking at today, but just think about Doubting Thomas, right? That's what we call him. We call him Doubting Thomas. I'm not going to believe until I can see your wounds and touch your side. But in Mark 9, starting in verse 14, we're going to start with something else. It says, when they came to the disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the scribes disputing with them. When the whole crowd saw him, they were amazed and they ran to greet him, and they asked him, and he asked them, "What are you arguing about?" Someone from the crowd said, "Teacher, I brought my son to you. He has a spirit in him that makes him unable to speak. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams at the mouth. He grinds his teeth. He becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to drive him out, but they couldn't." He replied to them, "You unbelieving generation, how long will I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring him to me." So they brought the boy to him. When he saw the spirit in him, it immediately threw the boy into convulsions. He fell to the ground. He rolled around, foaming at the mouth. "How long has this been happening to him?" Jesus asked his father. He said, "From childhood," he said, "and many times it's thrown him into the fire or into water to destroy him. But if you can do anything, have compassion on us." Jesus said to him, this is one of my favorite Jesus said moments, "If I can?" He's like, "Yeah, I can," all right? And if I can, and so he says, "Everything is possible for the one who believes." Immediately the father of the boy cried out, "I do believe, help my unbelief." Right? We see doubt there. When Jesus saw that the crowd was quickly gathering, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, "You mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." Then it came out shrieking and throwing him into terrible convulsions. The boy became like a corpse, so that many said, "He is dead." But Jesus, taking him by the hand, raised him up and stood him up. After he had gone into the house, the disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" And he told him, "This kind can come out by nothing but prayer." All right, the father, what he does is he brings his demon-possessed son to Jesus. And as we read through this, what we find out is that he's actually already brought him over to the disciples, okay? So he brought him to the disciples first, and the disciples can't help. But I want you to kind of set this scene. Why would they even bring him to the disciples? Like, disciples are like you and me. They're not Jesus, right? So why would they even bring him to them? But if you go back to Mark chapter 6, what you see in verse 7, it says, Jesus summoned the 12, and he began to send them out in pairs, and he gave them authority over unclean spirits. And so here we are, we've got the disciples, he's actually given them the authority to go out and drive out spirits and to heal the sick and to do all these things. And in verse 13, it says they drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. okay? So somewhere between chapter 6 and chapter 9, the disciples have already healed a bunch of people, okay? So they are able to do this. God has given them, Jesus has given them the authority to do it. He's given them the power to do it. And then we get to chapter 9, and they take them to the disciples, and he's expecting them to do something, and they can't do it. The disciples, they're like, I don't know. What do we do? They're beginning to get their own following and their own followers. In fact, Luke 10 tells us the 72, these are people that had been given the power to do these things. They returned with joy, saying, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. So again, these things are happening. But when we get to Mark 9, the Father brings his demon-possessed son to Jesus because the disciples can't help. This father has been let down. He had really high hopes and expectations that the disciples would take care of things, and they were unable to deliver. And this is the question, I think. Should this man have put so much hope in these guys that were not Jesus? And my answer is actually yes, they should have, and no, they shouldn't have. Okay, so yes and no. Jesus had given them the authority to do so they should have hope that they'd be able to do this. They had proven that they were capable because they had done it already. And so here we are. I believe that the bulk of this father's doubt, right? Remember, he has doubt. He says, I do believe, help my unbelief. I believe the bulk of his doubt has come from the fact that the disciples let him down. And many times the bulk of our doubt as Christians is that a pastor lets you down, or a church leader lets you down, or a small group leader lets you down. Somebody who has this authority has let you down, right? He should have had faith that these disciples can do it. They had proven that they could do it. Jesus had given them the authority to do it. You should have a reasonable faith in your leaders that they can, do the right thing, that they could be in the right place, that they can say the right things, that they should know the right things. But what happens when they let you down? Because I would say that the disciples let this father down. Even they expected that they should do it. That's why they asked Jesus, hey, how come I couldn't do it? How come we couldn't handle this? And the answer was, you didn't pray. You didn't pray. What happened was, what I believe happened here is that the disciples had been given power and authority to do this, that they had been healing people in Jesus' name, and then as they continue to heal people, as they continue to drive out spirits, because they've been given the authority to do it, the power to do it, they started doing this in their own power. And then they get to this one, and this one's hard, and they're like, oh man, don't worry, I gotcha. Demon, go out. Nothing happens. Hey, demon, get out of here. Nothing happens. All right, one more. Demon, get out of here. Nothing happens. And so they have to go to Jesus. And Jesus, of course, Jesus does it. He does it by the power of the Holy Spirit. And there he is. And hey, Jesus, why couldn't we do it? This one can only come out by prayer. You forgot who gave you your power. You forgot where that power comes from. You didn't pray. You started to rely on yourself rather than God and church. This is hard because just like you, I am prone to rely on myself rather than God. Really, we all are, right? And it doesn't let us off the hook. It is simply the truth. And I believe that this father experienced serious doubt when the very representatives of Jesus, those that he believed he could count on, let him down. And oftentimes, when this happens to us in the church today, these doubts, they'll lead to serious consequences to our faith. Sometimes it leads to demolition of our faith. And then we have nothing rebuilt in its place. And it's in these times of doubt caused by people that we need to remember that people will fail us, but Jesus never will. But because of our doubt, when this father approaches Jesus, right, you can just feel the uncertainty as he asks, if you can do anything, take pity on us and help. And Jesus answers, if you can, all things are possible for those who believe. And then this man cries out, I believe, help my unbelief. With uncertainty, he asks, if you can do anything, take pity on us. Right? That's honest faith. It's not fake confidence. It's not Sunday school sermons. It's a real faith that says, hey, I'm trying, but I'm struggling. And Jesus doesn't shame him, does he? He heals the boy. And here's your truth to take home with you, right? Doubt's not the opposite of faith, but what is the opposite of faith? Unbelief is the opposite of faith. There's a difference between doubt and unbelief. Doubt's part of living. Doubt's part of a growing faith. You're asking questions, but unbelief is so much different. Let's keep talking as we turn to another truth here. Faith can break you when life hurts. Faith can break when life hurts. Sometimes faith feels like it's just broken. Not because we're rebellious, but because we're hurt. Maybe you've prayed and God just felt silent. Maybe someone you love has passed away. Maybe the church let you down. Maybe you believed things would turn out a certain way, but they didn't turn out that way, right? Real life can be really messy. Real life can mess with our faith sometimes, especially when the people that should help you let you down. Look at the words of King David in Psalm 13. He says, how long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long will I store up anxious concerns within me, agony in my mind every day? How long will my enemies dominate me? That's in the Bible, guys. That's doubt in the Bible. And it's there to remind us that God invites our questions. God invites our pain. He invites our brokenness. And here's some good news for you. God isn't afraid of your doubts. He's not afraid of your pain. He's not afraid of your questions. But he does want to rebuild. He wants to help you when everything feels like it's fallen apart. We have to know that rebuilding, though, starts with honesty. Starts with honesty. King David here was honest. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? I don't even understand that question. How long will you forget me forever? The first step to rebuilding is just to be honest. Not to perform, not to pretend, but to show up with how you really feel. When your faith is under construction, the temptation is to cover it up. Right, to just put a finished sign on it, even though nothing's working. You can't rebuild what you will not admit that is broken. Do you know what one of Jesus' favorite questions was? What do you want me to do for you? What do you want me to do for you? That's one of his favorite questions. Why do you think he would even ask a question like that? Because he's looking for honesty. He's looking for you to be honest. Because honesty opens the door to your healing. So today, if you're struggling with doubting God's goodness, if you're deconstructing what you were taught, if you're feeling abandoned in your pain, just lean in and hear this. You're not alone. You are not unworthy. You're not beyond rebuilding. But reconstruction isn't instant. 1 or 2 Sundays at Faith Chapel isn't going to fix your doubt. It's not going to fix your life. In fact, Faith Chapel will never fix your life. We can stand and we can be here and we can help you. We can point you to Jesus, but the only one who will help build your faith is Jesus. Now, I want instant answers. We all want instant answers, but Jesus gives us a process. And rebuilding your faith happens just like building a building. It happens brick by brick. It happens with grace, with community, with scripture, with prayer, with time, with Jesus. So think about the disciples after Jesus' resurrection, right? Some still doubted, right? We talked about doubting Thomas. But Jesus didn't fire them. He commissioned them. Your doubt doesn't disqualify you from God's mission. It actually might be the very thing that equips you to walk with others in their own messy construction projects. So if that's you today, if you're struggling with faith, or maybe you know someone who's struggling, I want you to experience this truth. Faith under construction has a foreman. And it's not you. And thankfully, it's not me. I remember after Hurricane Harvey, my house flooded, my whole cul-de-sac flooded. In fact, my whole street basically flooded. And our network of churches that we're a part of, Converge, they raised a bunch of money and they sent it our way in order to, one, help rebuild my house, because we didn't have flood insurance, help rebuild the houses on our cul-de-sac, help rebuild any people that we have come across, any people in our church, anything like that, to help them with their rebuild project. But what that meant was, because that was sent to me, I now became the foreman of all of these projects. Guys, I'm a bad foreman. I mean, eventually I called up our friends at Converge, and I said, hey, do you guys have anyone that you can send to us and help us with this? And thankfully there was a guy who was out of work at a church in Dallas who came down, and he had experience in these kinds of things, and he took care of this for us. And we were able to, since he was out of work, we were able to pay him to take care of these projects, and it worked out really well. But I was a horrible foreman, and I can be a little bit of a help, but I can't reconstruct your faith. But Jesus can. I can be a part of it. The people sitting next to you, they'll be a part of it, but they can't do it. But Jesus can. And so faith under construction has a foreman. And as faithful as I can be, as faithful as the church can be, Paul says in Philippians 1:6, I'm sure of this, that he who started a good work in you will carry it on to completion until the day of Christ Jesus. I didn't start a good work in you. Jesus did. You're not building alone. God's your foreman. He has the blueprint. He knows where this is going. He's not giving up on you. He's not giving up on your project. That is for you. It is for your faith. You're a part of it. I'm a part of it. The church is a part of it. And we all should be. But we are all merely imperfect workers in the building project of our faith. We will make poor decisions along the way. But like the disciples, we may forget to pray. We may forget to rely on the power of God. We might try things on our own without the foreman. But with God, all things are possible. Everything is possible for the one who believes, even when it's an imperfect faith. So this morning, I want to remind you again that we are all under construction, no matter where you are in this room. So whether you're looking at a renovation, or you've been torn down to the studs, or an earthquake has come in and demolished everything, I want to invite you into an imperfect, honest belief into what God can do. I want to invite you to really engage into this series, because I believe that it can and will be helpful to all of us. So over the next few weeks, this is what we're going to do. We're going to look at some themes that are sure to help us as we rebuild. As we talk about why we doubt, what to do when God feels silent, how to deconstruct without destroying, where to find solid ground again, how to build a deeper and stronger faith, and some topics that really just can cause weakness in our faith. So wherever you are on this journey, I would say that you belong here. Whether you're full of faith or barely hanging on, God is still at work in you. Church, faith under construction is still faith. Faith under construction is still faith. So if you're struggling, don't walk away, lean in. If you're doubting, don't hide, bring it to Jesus. And if you're broken, don't despair, because rebuilding is what God does best.